The food truck, I can honestly say, it's an award-winning food truck because we serve very unique, delicious, international fusion flavored foods. But I also hire some of our staff are people coming out of a prison system who need a second chance or a difficult or disadvantaged communities. And then we also distribute food to the poor, working with a religious order and doing like weekly drop-offs. But it really is a movement to bring people together.
Welcome back to Prosper, everyone. I'm your host, Andreas Widmer, with my colleague, Rebecca Teti. We're coming to you from the Ciocca Center, the Entrepreneurship Center of the Catholic University of America, the place where innovation meets personal vocation. This is actually a big day for us, Rebecca. Can you believe it? I think this is start of season 3. And I don't know if it's true or not, but Kate Schultz, our fabulous producer who puts all of this together, she found an article somewhere on the internet that says that everyone has a podcast, but few of them last past episode 21. So we're going to get a prize because this is, by my counting, episode 25, the Jubilee episode. And that puts us in the top 21% of podcasts in the world, according to the internet, or a random internet article that Kate found. But puts me in a good mood. How about you, Rebecca?
Yeah, me too. That's very gratifying. You know, one point of order, I don't know if we've ever mentioned that this kickoff for this show began with a grant from the John Templeton Foundation, because this is the part of a larger program that we had to kind of emphasize some of the work of our late colleague, Michael Novak. And so we're grateful for them for that funding, but especially because it facilitates wonderful conversations with cool people like our next guest. And so let's bring him right in.
And if I'm not mistaken, the poster behind you is actually Michael Novak, isn't it? Yeah.
That is true. Yes. So advertising our fellowship program.
Yeah. But yes, let's bring our guest into the conversation right away. Ladies and gentlemen, Father Leo Patalinghug, a Roman Catholic priest, chef, food entrepreneur, but you probably know him as a best-selling author or from his EWTN television show, or most importantly, his Plating Grace Apostolate, which aims to strengthen family ties through the gift of the family meal. Welcome, Father Leo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We like to open with a little warm-up question. And so I usually ask people, what time you get up in the morning and why? And also, what's something awesome that you're reading right now?
I wake up generally, depending on my schedule, probably the earliest I have to wake up on any given day is around 3:30 in order to catch a flight at 5 o'clock. If I don't have a flight, because I travel quite a bit, I just by default will always wake up between 5:30 and 6 a.m. And that doesn't mean I always get out of bed, but that is what time I always wake up. And as far as reading, to be honest with you, I'm making my way through this massive book called Triumph by Crocker. It is this humongous 2,000-year history book, and it's excellent. It's really excellent. And what's wonderful is that what I have always known and believed is kind of confirmed historically, and he's a very good writer, and it's a lot of fun to read 2,000 years of history.
Yeah, Harry Crocker kind of makes history palatable for those who don't necessarily have the taste for a deep dive into it. So that's neat. What made you pick that up?
Well, it was a big book, and I just thought to myself during the Lenten season, I want to get something quite consistent. I've read enough spirituality books. I can always read more, but I just wanted to do something that was going to edify me, confirm my faith, but also provide context because, the Catholic Church's history is fascinating. It truly is fascinating. And I don't think people know enough about it. And there are parts, I've been ordained over 25 years, things that I didn't know and I'm learning. So I just say that history will repeat itself if you don't know it. So let's learn it.
Well, that's a good segue from church history into personal history. So we'd love to hear in this first segment a little bit about your story and how, like, if you read an early enough bio, it'll talk about your being a choreographer for breakdancing, and how did you go from there to priesthood to having this food apostolate?
Yeah, there's a lot to it because I just grew up in the 80s. And so I was doing what everybody did at the time. But our breakdancing group, again, I was a teenager at that era. It was just what we did. But it became a real lesson, honestly, on how to present ourselves as professional dancers and then also as competitors. It required athleticism, which we all kind of got because we were all martial artists. And so I just grew up as a normal kid. And then I was struck by the power of our faith and the beauty of our church by going on a pilgrimage. And originally it was what was Yugoslavia. Now it's Croatia or Bosnia-Herzegovina. I went to Medjugorje, and that really impacted my convictions. And then, of course, learning more about my faith through parish mission preachers. And so I started to get a little bit more involved in my church. And when I went to Rome, I actually fell in love with the culinary aspect. I mean, Andreas, you know that Europe just approaches food very differently from Americans. And we learned what it meant to truly take time for a meal. I had already done that as a Filipino American in my household, but as you get older, you kind of move away from the family meals. And in Italy, we were forced to do it.
I was going to say that the Filipinos are probably the Italians of Asia.
Yeah.
In terms of food, they top the chart in food and music, both of which you were involved in one way or the other. And I think it's also very Filipino. It's very Filipino to connect food and faith, isn't it?
Because I think we have to remember that the humbler the country, and I'm even talking about poverty, you know, I mean, while Italy is a magnificent country, it wasn't always wealthy, but they had a very strong connection to food because it brought people together and it was their way of surviving harsh conditions. So correct, in the Philippines, while people there are poor, there is a real sense of joy that comes from family, and the family together creates an organic fiesta mentality. And it was there in Italy that I developed a theology of food. I had already learned about cooking from my mom, but I also took culinary courses, and it was just for fun. But when I came back to America, I realized that it really was an apostolate to try to make connections from the universal church's dinner table, which is the altar, and making sure that we can connect it to the domestic church's altar, which is their dinner table. So I've developed this theology of food, written some books, people heard about it, and the thing that really made this apostolate explode was when I was featured several years ago on the Food Network, and I was in a competition with Bobby Flay, and I won. And that really exploded, or at least put on a different platform, the work that I do as a priest and as a chef. And now there's a whole faith and food movement. I even have a food truck. And recently, as of last year, we even acquired a restaurant space that we are kind of creating some regular meal opportunities for everyone who wants to come.
Well, hold that thought, because I think we'll take time. This is a great place to take a break for a second and let our sponsor talk. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about your food truck and about your what you do entrepreneurially in the food space. Did you know that family businesses account for 2/3 of America's GDP and are responsible for creating 6 in 10 jobs in the United States? That's right. Family enterprises like yours are the backbone of our economy, the heart of our communities, and the keepers of legacies that span generations. We think about family business differently at Catholic University's Bush School of Business. That's why we created the Family Business Consortium. Just as the family is the first and essential cell of human society, family business is an indispensable part of a flourishing economy. We know that running a family business isn't just about the bottom line. It's about balancing Sunday dinner conversations with boardroom decisions, preserving your family's values while innovating for the future, and building something meaningful for the next generation. Think of us as your extended family in business. We connect you with top industry experts who understand your unique challenges, whether you're looking to grow while staying true to your values, managing the delicate balance of family dynamics and business decisions, or planning your succession. At the Family Business Consortium, we've created a community of peers who truly get it. They've sat in your chair, faced similar decisions, and found ways to thrive while keeping family at the core of their success. We host 2 free full-day seminars annually, available both in person on our gorgeous campus in Washington, D.C., and online. Our next gathering is Friday, October 17th. Our mission is simple: to help generations of family businesses like yours grow in every sense of the word, professionally, personally, and purposefully. Because when family businesses thrive, communities prosper. Find out more in the show notes to the podcast or at familybusinessconsortium.org. That's familybusinessconsortium.org. All right, welcome back to Prosper. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Father Leo Patalinghug, founder of Plating Grace and also the Table Foundation. Father Leo, right before the break, you were talking to us about Grace and Grub, about your food truck, and about your restaurant. So go for it. Tell us more about how that came about and what you're learning from it and how people can be involved if they're in the Baltimore area.
So I was always doing a lot with faith and food, but primarily in the form of speaking, some private dinners, my TV show, which is Savoring Our Faith on EWTN. And so doing a lot of talking about food. But then during COVID, I realized that, first of all, I was so bored. And I joke around and say I completed Netflix in the 2 weeks to flatten the curve, that I just found myself wanting to do something. And really prayer, God just said, well, you're the cooking priest, go and feed people. And so I started to just pack up my car and distribute it to food to the homeless people, because they were really hurting, very hurting, because they had no one to panhandle to. And so I kind of prayed about that, and the inspiration came from some of our board members to get a food truck. And so the food truck, I can honestly say, it's an award-winning food truck because we serve very unique, delicious, international fusion flavored foods. But I also hire some of our staff are people coming out of a prison system who need a second chance, or a difficult or disadvantaged communities. And then we also distribute food to the poor, working with a religious order and doing like weekly drop-offs. But it really is a movement to bring people together. And just as of last year, we were looking for a new kitchen so that we can do our cooking before we bring it out on the truck. And by chance, we met an incredible man who had a beautiful kitchen, who was willing to rent it to us. And then he said, but if I let you use the kitchen, you've got to do something with this restaurant space. And it would just be honestly stupid of me not to try. And you asked what I learned. I learned that hospitality is one of the most difficult vocations that we have, because it requires you to be ever present, requires consistency and patience, all of the virtues that I hate praying for, because I know God will answer every one of them. Patience and humility, just all of those things. And so we've been making a go of it. And I got to tell you, I've been a priest now 25 years. This is one of the most challenging things that I've had to do, is to put my faith onto a plate in order to hopefully feed hungry souls who might not even be looking for God, but they'll come to my restaurant looking for good food. I want them to experience the presence of God, even if I don't say anything, hoping that my actions speak loudly and clearly.
What you do, Father, inspires me to no end. We know each other for a while, and I've always been inspired. I think the fact that you started a restaurant is, in a way, I could have foretold that with your with your drive for entrepreneurship and for serving people. But it is also inspiring. Like a lot of the businesses that we help here in DC are food businesses. It's beautiful, even though I think the food business may be one of the most competitive areas in entrepreneurship. It is also the one with the lowest barrier of entry, which probably makes it so competitive. And so a lot of people can relate to you and live in a way, are inspired by you, because I think a good 30% of the businesses that we deal with here are food businesses. And the food trucks, of course, in DC, they're ubiquitous, but in other cities, they're growing. What are some of the things that have surprised you? It's interesting. You have an experience that most priests never have, that you're in the actual economy in one of the most competitive areas, and you're literally building a business. It's a serving business and a sustainable business.
Well, I'm failing in some regards because I think I was not trained to be a restaurateur or a professional chef, although I'm doing both now, because I feel like God has kind of pulled me into those categories. But it's very consistent with my kind of religious formation. I'm a member of a community of consecrated life. It's a secular institute called Voluntas Dei, which means the will of God. And our objective is to kind of bring God's presence to the secular world. And in following Jesus's example, he obviously used a lot of food. So I'm creating again this theological framework for food, but making it very tangible, very incarnational. And you're right. It's actually the most challenging industry to get into. And it has a high percentage of failure. And so if I don't succeed with this, to be honest with you, I'm going to be okay because I'm learning something, but I don't want it to fail. I'm working my backside off, so to speak, to keep it going.
It's the most basic. You see, I feel business in general is a very Christian thing to do because business asks, how may I help you? But the business you're in, the food and hospitality business, is literally the most other-directed business there is, because you are trying to satisfy somebody's hunger through their taste, and the feedback is imminent. And that must be a rewarding comparison, because you're feeding people with the body and blood of Jesus Christ. But then you're actually the precursor to this is you're feeding them physically to then come to be fed by you in their soul. That must be something that is not lost at you at all.
Not at all. I joke around, but this is true, because we're not an actual full-blown restaurant yet. We're more than anything a culinary event space where people can come to eat during our select dining times, but we really promote events, private events, culinary experiences like cooking classes. So for example, this is something interesting, but we're going to actually host a Palm Sunday supper, and I'm going to focus the entire meal around palm, the food of palm, whether it be palm oil or the actual hearts of palm, and turn that into a 4-course meal. So this is the kind of stuff that we're doing. But I'll also say this, that I have been very challenged because the first event that I ever had was on March 19th, the feast of San Giuseppe, St. Joseph. And it happened to be through a neighbor who lives in my area, and he's gay. And it was his birthday party. And the entire guest lists were made up of people from that community. And they were in my restaurant. And it was and I didn't feel bad about it at all. But I know that if some people were to look out there and be like, what is Father Leo doing? He's eating with sinners, so to speak. Well, that's kind of right. And while that was all happening, the host, my neighbor, asked me to bless the food which we were about to receive. And so it was a very ironic situation, but I knew that God was calling. If you have faith, a light, do you just go to a place where there is light, or do you not go to places that are darkened with shadows? So I just know that the food industry is very dark. we need light. And where do I get that? By the fact that the church has more canonized saints dedicated to the hospitality industry than any other profession.
I love that. It's a Protestant group, but I can't think of the name of them, but they evangelize, and they have this saying that people belong before they believe. And so I always think that we miss opportunities to evangelize. We have a tendency, I think, to want to lead with not just with moral lectures, but with faith-based, let's start with the creed. And I think sometimes we lose the opportunity to use these cultural things like a good meal or the Feast of St. Joseph to just welcome and have a warm experience that plants a seed or draws a thread that you can then pull on later. So we hope that there's a beautiful seed planted there in that experience.
Well, we have to touch hearts and minds, but Christ taught us that the easiest way to do that is to go through their stomachs. We have to remember that we've got to care for the thing in front of us first, which is their body. And only then can we actually maybe make our way to touch their soul. That's what Christ did. Before he taught the most beautiful sermons, he was very aware of their needs. And so, look, I don't have the ability to do as Jesus did and preach the Beatitudes before I turn fish into 5,000 for a meal. So I knowing my humanity and my brokenness, I know that we all have to have a hook, and my hook is good food. It is elixir. It is a lubricant for community.
Father, there's many of our listeners are in the food business, but there's one angle I'd like to highlight and see maybe if you can give some of our listeners a tip. And that is, one of our programs is the SEED program, which is the high school entrepreneurship program. And one of the cornerstone projects we ask those students to do, and because they're high schools and we want them to start to, business is all about this other directedness. And as I said earlier, I think you're in the most other directed business there is, because the feedback is immediate and the reactions to food that people don't like is, you can't fake it. Like, you can't pretend. They will tell you right away. And so what we're asking our students to do in this high school program is that we ask them to create an evening, a Sunday evening or a Saturday evening dinner for their family, to take into account everybody's preferences and love of different foods, to make it an overall experience, to make sure that the music is right, that the food is right, the table is beautiful, because you want to eat with the eye as well, and to create a menu for their family, and first do the interview with everybody, and then afterwards do a review, as if it was a customer review, like what you would ask your clients, to create a wholesome, beautiful experience, to choose the right prayer before dinner and after dinner. Can you maybe give some of our students an idea how to bring together when there's so many tastes or preferences around the table with 4 or 5 people in the family? How you do your magic of creating a menu that has a little bit something in it for everybody?
That's actually one of the most difficult things for even the most seasoned chef to do. But it's the difference between a real artist as a chef and a cook. Because a cook will just throw out food and that's perfectly fine. A chef is kind of what I would call an artist. And it's actually the similar technique of preaching. So I'm actually in the middle of writing another book, and it's going to be called How to Feed Your Flock Without Boring Them. And it really begins by asking, what are you hungry for? And as you mentioned, you'll ask these students to interview people. And what we find is that people don't know what they're hungry for, that they're so confused. And if they are able to articulate it, will that young cook have the skills to put it all together, especially if someone says, I like Chinese food, I like Mexican food, I like beef, I'm a vegetarian. This is a great burden. But guess what? That's exactly what a priest has to face when he's talking to a church full of people who are hungry for everything but God. So it does require technique. And so here's what I would recommend to those young chefs. Do small courses. So if somebody wanted a vegetarian dish, then make sure that there is vegetable dish on every plate that they make. If someone wanted to eat Mexican cuisine, then make maybe an appetizer, which is like a taquito, and make sure there's vegetables in it. And then if someone says, I like Chinese food, but someone says, I like Italian food, well, then use spaghetti and turn it into lo mein. And it does require a tremendous amount of creativity, discipline, and I think the third ingredient is inspiration. Tell your students to talk to God. After he does this interview, or she does this interview with family, then take that to prayer. And God has an amazing way of creating a recipe for you. In fact, that's what I did with the Food Network. The recipe that beat Bobby Flay literally came from prayer.
Well, so then you were cheating is what you're saying.
I was using the gift of God's presence in my life. And with God, all things are possible.
Father, I have to get one more question in from my side. It's very self-serving, okay? But I hear that you bring people on culinary trips to Europe and other places. I don't know the particulars, but following you to go from restaurant to restaurant and church to church, I would do that.
That's what we do, because I'm trying to get people to stop being so parochial in their Catholic faith, because it could lead to parochialism. We have to remember that we are a pilgrim ship, and our pilgrim ship is supposed to go to the places of the world that God created that are beautiful. And I can also proudly say that whenever we take people to all of these Catholic places, they are so inspired by the beauty, by the organization, by the art, by the history. I can say that the Catholic Church makes the world great again. It is really our mission to show people all of these fancy places that everyone likes talking about and putting pictures on social media. Well, it all belongs to the Catholic Church. And so thank God we create beautiful stops along our pilgrimage way, which are vestiges, just glimpses, traces of what heaven is going to look like. And yeah, faith and food, they go perfectly together.
Well, that's a note to end on, but I'm not going to let you end there. I have to ask one more question, which is, so how do you, because we have to throw a bone to our listeners who are entrepreneurs and are running businesses for themselves. And so you've said a little bit about the food industry, but say a little bit about what it is to, like, what's the business model that allows you to do this food truck and allows you to have this events, almost restaurant, and still do these trips? Like, what have you learned about entrepreneurship and about business to keep all those things going?
I have a terrible business model because even during the slow seasons of the food truck, I keep my staff employed. We make no money, and I give food to the poor. It's a terrible business plan. But I think the reason why we can stay afloat is because we have multiple revenue streams. You know, we're not such a big restaurant, and so we have to use it for other things. I think you have to, as an entrepreneur, realize that your one product is never going to be the silver bullet that just, your ultimate bread and butter. So we have multiple revenue streams, including charitable donations, but also partnering with other organizations who want to support us. So they're not charity, it's partnership. And then, of course, my work is contributing to it as well. So I think multiplicity of revenue streams is good. But secondly, I think it is making sure that your brand is consistent. We struggled in the restaurant because we thought, well, why don't we open it up and just show off what we can cook? And we're discovering that that's not our brand. Our brand is making sure that we focus on good food that is connected to some sort of spiritual experience. So feast days, we want to celebrate that. We make an amazing corned beef and cabbage for St. Patrick's. We're doing a Filipino fiesta to celebrate some of the Filipino martyrs. You hear about Palm Sunday, San Giuseppe. What's really beautiful is that our brand, in focusing on Catholic feast celebrations, we just happen to have a ton of them in the Catholic Church. And so I'm just so grateful that we believe in a church that has more feasting and some fasting. You know? And even our fasting. So, for example, during Fridays of Lent, which have been our busiest season so far, is because we've worked on good fish and chips, small plates, half portions, with a lot of delicious seafood and vegetarian options. So it's just been a strange thing. We just have to stay on brand.
Well, listen, before we go, where can listeners find you to connect? And we're going to be sure to put all kinds of links in the show notes. But and especially maybe you want to do a shout out to your restaurant, because we have a lot of East Coast listeners who might show up in Baltimore.
Yeah. So the website that we have, where you can get everything, our parent hub company is called platinggrace.com. People can learn about our nonprofit. It's called the Plating Grace Foundation. And then our restaurant food group is called Grace and Grub, which is the name of the food truck. And the restaurant, because we didn't want to make it so religious, because it's right in Baltimore's downtown Little Italy, is called the Gastro Social. Gastro is a nickname for gastronomy, and social is what we want to do, is bring people together around food. Food is the most religious thing that God gives to us. It's the thing that can bind us together.
That's beautiful and is inspirational. Father, there needs to be more like you, but we are thankful for you being one and being one of our great inspirations. We hope to find more ways to collaborate. You're a distinguished fellow of the Ciocca Center, and we proudly count you as one of our own. I'm going to let you go now, Father, but Rebecca and I will be right back with our parting thoughts.
Thank you, and appreciate the invitation. And let me extend one to all of you. Let's bring the Ciocca Center to Baltimore. I would love to cook you all a meal.
We are there. We will find the time. Thank you. Thank you so much, Father Leo.
So, welcome back. As always, talking with Father is just so inspirational. It sort of slows me down to think about everything, because I find that, you know, bread and wine in the Eucharist transformation, and then the meal, you know, that Jesus really, it is very biblical, the meal, the Last Supper. But before that, you know, how Jesus ate with the 5,000 and the 7,000, and it's accused, you know, ate with sinners, and all of that always has to do with food. And I think that what Father brings to my mind is that Jesus definitely was a foodie. Like he was into food because it calms you down and brings you together. And I think what's so inspirational is how Father sees this as a family table. He's trying to inspire families to get together and eat together, which is in a way very Eucharistic, right? That's what we do as a church family, right? To get around this table. He's just inspiring to no end. Also, the other side that he talked about, and I hope some of our students listen to this, is, and this is just good for all of us, making smaller courses, smaller courses, which increases the chance for people to like something that's on it. That's very translatable into all kinds of things that we're doing in business and in private life.
Yeah, even his business model, right? The multiple revenue streams.
Yeah, including his business model. He goes into smaller chunks, but adds different things. It's almost like a diversification strategy. That's how he pleases a whole group's palate, but that's also how he makes his books balance at the end in his business.
Yeah, like you, I'm touched by the Eucharistic nature of what he's doing. And also it just struck me, I love the fact that this food truck idea began because he was restless and bored. but then he thought, what can I do? And one of the things he's doing is just giving people dignity, the dignity of, a face-to-face encounter, and look, you're worthy of a decent meal. And I love the power of that. And it's something that we can all tap into, whether it's with our families or, neighbors, or I think about single people that I know who feel like they're not always invited to family events, but you can make, beautiful, touching engagements around the culture of a meal that doesn't have to necessarily be fancy. Like, I balk a little bit at your saying that Jesus is a foodie. I know what you mean. He definitely understands the human experience of meeting somebody across the table, but he's not obsessed with the gourmet. So we can do these things in simple ways too.
I let that stand as you say it, because I agree with it. But I also agree that our time's up. And that is pretty much the time we have for today. For this topic, we thank Father Leo again, and of course, always you, Rebecca, and Kate, who's in the background, who probably is true with the article that she found. We're going to celebrate being in the top 21 right now. And friends, for you, take care. Until next time, we hope you prosper.